Canada has always colored outside the culinary lines, creating foods that feel completely normal here, but leave the rest of the world scratching their heads. From ketchup-stained fingers at every birthday party to gum that proudly tastes like soap, these weren't just snacks, they were the soundtrack of growing up Canadian. What most people don't realize is that these beloved staples emerged from regional pride, quirky innovations, and a distinctly Canadian willingness to embrace the weird as wonderful. This is 20 foods that are normal in Canada but nowhere else, and if you grew up here, you've probably had half of these stuck in your teeth. Which ones do you remember most? Let's open the lunchbox. Ketchup chips. Close your eyes and picture a 1980s birthday party. Orange plastic bowls line the table, and there they are, bags of Old Dutch or Hostess ketchup chips. Every kid's fingertips are stained bright red, and nobody minds. That's just what chips look like in Canada. Hostess, an Ontario chip company founded back in 1935, invented ketchup chips in the late 70s. The tangy tomato-sweet flavor caught on immediately here, spreading across grocery stores and convenience shops from coast to coast. But here's the strange part. When American chip companies tried the same flavor south of the border, it flopped hard. Through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, ketchup chips remained stubbornly, proudly Canadian. Visiting cousins from the States would stare at the bags like they were prank flavors. Ketchup on chips? But for Canadian kids, that red dust was just part of life. Birthday parties, school lunches, road trips. Even today, tourists buy ketchup chips as souvenirs, proof that what's normal here is exotic everywhere else. That red-stained couch cushion from 1984, still worth it. Vachon snack cakes, Quebec bakery. Vachon, founded in 1923, moved into snack cakes early in the 20th century. The Mae West cake, a cream-filled round sponge named after actress Mae West, became a Quebec favorite in the 30s. Jos Louis, created in 1932 and named after the Vachon sons Joseph and Louis, is a chocolate-coated twin cake with cream filling that became a cross-Canada lunchbox icon. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, these cakes filled Canadian corner stores but remained almost unknown outside the country. They had that uniquely Canadian fake Twinkie but better status, not fancy, not imported, just reliable local snack cakes that everyone recognized. Jos Louis with its chocolate coating, Mae West with its cream filling, simple pleasures that felt completely normal here but exotic everywhere else. Macintosh's toffee. Macintosh's toffee began in the UK in the late 1800s, but Canada developed its own version, a hard rectangular Mac bar sold in a tartan box. It became a winter and movie theater tradition, often softened in a coat pocket or on a radiator before eating. The ritual of breaking it apart, hammer, freezer, patience, became part of the experience. Other countries got assorted soft Macintosh toffees, but the specific Canadian hard bar became a nostalgia object. People missed that very particular Canadian toffee ritual enough that it was later revived. It wasn't just candy, it was the crack of the hammer on Christmas morning, the tartan box under the tree, the way everyone had their own technique. Normal in Canada, oddly specific everywhere else. Thrills Gum. Thrills is a Canadian gum brand originally produced by O.P. in London, Ontario, starting around the 1940s. Its rosewater flavor is so often compared to soap that the packaging eventually leaned into the joke with the tagline, "It still tastes like soap," printed right on the box. Sold mostly in Canada, Thrills became the textbook, "Only Canadians understand this candy." It was a dare, a joke, and somehow a weirdly fond memory all at once. Why would anyone keep eating gum that tastes like soap? Because it was Canadian, that's why. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, Thrills stayed weird and stayed Canadian. You either loved it ironically or actually loved it, but either way, you remembered it. That purple box was a rite of passage. Tiger tail ice cream. Tiger Tail is a distinctly Canadian ice cream flavor, orange ice cream swirled with black licorice, named for its tiger stripe appearance. It was especially popular in Canada from the 50s through the 70s and remains most common in southern Ontario and Atlantic Canada. Outside Canada, it's almost impossible to find. For many Gen X Canadians, Tiger Tail was the childhood scoop that confused visiting cousins who expected chocolate or vanilla and instead got orange licorice chaos. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. Nobody forgot it. It was the ice cream that tasted like summer in small-town Canada. Weird, wonderful, and completely normal if you grew up here. The rest of the world just didn't get the memo. All-dressed chips. That confusion makes sense because all-dressed chips are almost entirely a Canadian invention. Quebec chip maker Yum Yum created them in 1978, inspired by the Works pizza, every topping at once. The flavor combines barbecue, salt and vinegar, sour cream and onion, and a hint of ketchup into one chaotic, addictive chip. For years, it stayed mostly in Canada. American brands didn't even attempt all-dressed until decades later, treating it as a limited edition experiment. But in Canada, from the 70s through the 90s, all-dressed was just another normal flavor sitting on the shelf. No explanation needed. You either got it or you didn't. And if you grew up here, you definitely got it. That's the beauty of all-dressed. It shouldn't work, but somehow it absolutely does. Hawkins Cheezies. Cheezies were developed after World War II by James Marker and W.T. Hawkins, who perfected extruded cornmeal snacks in Ontario and founded W.T. Hawkins Limited in 1949. Made in Belleville, Ontario, using real aged cheddar, they became the Canadian alternative to American Cheetos. But Cheezies are sharper, crunchier, more intense, and they barely cross the border. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, Americans rarely saw them. For Canadians, though, Cheezies were the default party bowl filler, the thing waiting in Grandma's cupboard on Saturday nights. They stained your fingers orange, stuck in your teeth, and tasted like childhood. The fact that the rest of the world didn't know about them just made them feel more special, a secret handshake snack that only we understood. Hickory sticks. Made under the Hostess brand and sold mainly in Canada, Hickory sticks are thin julienned potato sticks with a hickory smoked flavor that became a playground and lunchbox staple. Their "Love 'em for the crunch, love 'em for the munch" tagline cemented them in Canadian snack culture through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Sure, other countries have generic potato sticks, but the specific hickory smoked Hostess branded version? That's uniquely Canadian. Expats moving abroad would beg friends flying home to stuff bags of hickory sticks into their suitcases. They're not fancy, not gourmet, just thin potato sticks with smoke flavor. But for Canadians, they're the taste of childhood gas station stops and school lunch trades. Normal here, exotic everywhere else. Coffee Crisp. Coffee Crisp started in Canada in 1939 as a coffee-flavored wafer bar made by Rowntrees. By the 60s, it was marketed with the slogan, "Give yourself a better break with Coffee Crisp," positioned as a light, grown-up treat. It became a Canadian grocery standard. Nearly every checkout lane had them, but rarely appeared in American stores. For decades, Coffee Crisp lived in this strange space, completely normal in Canada, virtually unknown elsewhere. Canadians who moved abroad in the 80s and 90s would get the same airport request from friends back home. "Can you bring Coffee Crisp?" It wasn't fancy chocolate, just crispy wafers with coffee flavor. But that's what made it special. It was the everyday Canadian candy bar that somehow never became everyday anywhere else. Smarties. Here's where it gets confusing. Smarties are candy-coated chocolate pieces originally created by Rowntrees in the UK, with the name dating back to 1937. In North America, Nestlé's chocolate Smarties ended up sold mainly in Canada because the United States already had a different Smarties brand, those chalky tablet candies. So from the 60s through the 90s, Canadian kids grew up thinking Smarties meant chocolate, while American kids use the same word for a totally different candy. It's a tiny culture shock that every cross-border friendship eventually hits. Wait, your Smarties are chocolate? For Canadians, those colorful candy shells filled with chocolate were normal Halloween candy. Normal movie treats, normal everything. The fact that Americans couldn't buy them just made them feel more Canadian. Telling and preparing this video took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the video. Nanaimo bars. Nanaimo bars are a no-bake dessert named after Nanaimo, British Columbia, with a crumb coconut base, custard-flavored middle, and chocolate topping. A recipe under this name appeared by the early 50s, and by the 80s they were widely promoted as a classic Canadian dessert, even showcased at Expo 86. While similar squares exist elsewhere, the name Nanaimo bar and its Canadian identity became strong enough that it ended up on postage stamps and in national polls as a favorite confection. They weren't complicated, no baking required, just layers pressed together, but they became iconic. Every potluck, every bake sale, every holiday table had them. Normal in Canada, named after a small BC town and barely known anywhere else. Butter tarts. Butter tarts are small pastry shells filled with a gooey mixture of butter, sugar or syrup, and eggs, an iconic Canadian dessert, especially in Ontario. The first known Canadian recipe was printed in a Barrie, Ontario cookbook in 1900, and by mid-century butter tarts were common in pioneer and church cookbooks. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, every family had a butter tart stance. Firm versus runny filling, raisins or no raisins. The debate became so intense, it was described as a matter of national pride. Some bakeries offered both versions just to keep the peace. They weren't fancy French pastries or imported delicacies, just simple Canadian tarts that sparked surprisingly passionate opinions, normal here, debated endlessly, and mostly unknown everywhere else. Pudding Chomeur. Pudding Chomeur, literally unemployed person's pudding, is a French-Canadian dessert dating back to the Great Depression, a basic cake batter baked in a pool of brown sugar or maple syrup. It became a cheap comfort dessert in Quebec households long before it hit restaurant menus. By the 80s and 90s, pudding Chomeur started appearing in bistros and sugar shacks, still mostly in Quebec and parts of French Canada. It was the dessert born from hard times that became a point of pride, simple ingredients creating something warm and sweet. For Quebec families, it was just what you made on Sunday. For visitors, it was a revelation, cake swimming in syrup, somehow not too sweet. Perfectly comforting. Normal in Quebec, barely heard of elsewhere. Saskatoon berry pie. Saskatoon berries grow across the prairies. They look like blueberries but have a more almondy, wild flavor. Saskatoon berry pie became a signature prairie dessert, recognized now as a classic Canadian sweet in food guides and travel pieces. Outside Canada and a few northern U.S. spots, Saskatoon berries are rare, and so is the pie. For many prairie kids of the 60s through 90s, it was just pie. Summer fruit, flaky crust, nothing fancy. But to outsiders, it tasted like a completely new fruit. That's the thing about regional Canadian foods. They feel ordinary when you grow up with them, but they're actually small miracles tied to specific landscapes. Saskatoon berry pie was normal on the prairies, exotic everywhere else, and absolutely worth purple-stained fingers. BeaverTails. BeaverTails began as a family fried dough recipe sold at a craft fair in Killaloe, Ontario in 1978, then opened a permanent stand in Ottawa's Byward Market in 1980. The whole wheat dough is stretched to resemble a beaver's tail, then fried and topped with cinnamon sugar, maple butter, or other toppings. Through the 80s and 90s, BeaverTails stands became fixtures at Canadian tourist spots and winter festivals, while remaining mostly unknown elsewhere. They were the taste of skating on the Rideau Canal, winter markets, cold nights warmed by hot pastry. Not donuts, not funnel cakes, something uniquely Canadian. For locals, grabbing a beaver tail was normal winter routine. For visitors, it was a strange, wonderful discovery. Either way, those frozen fingers holding hot dough became a very specific Canadian memory. Poutine. Poutine emerged in rural Quebec snack bars in the late 50s, combining fries, fresh cheese curds, and hot brown gravy. For years it was working-class fast food, sometimes mocked even within Quebec, before spreading across the country in the 80s and 90s. By the 90s, poutine appeared on national fast food menus and began its slow march into gourmet restaurants. But for Canadians who remember it before the trend, poutine is still the thing you ate in a fogged-up chip shack after a night out. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't healthy. It was just what you ordered when you needed warm, salty comfort. Normal in Quebec first, then normal across Canada, and now finally spreading worldwide. But it started as a humble snack bar creation that most of the world had never heard of. Tourtiere. Tourtiere is a French-Canadian double-crusted meat pie, usually with pork or a mix of meats and potatoes, eaten around Christmas and New Year's as part of the Réveillon feast. Its roots go back to 17th century Quebec, but it remained an everyday winter dish in many Quebec and Acadian families. Outside Canada and a few New England pockets, tourtiere is mostly unknown. For Canadians of the 60s through 90s, though, meat pie at Christmas was just the way things were. Every family had their own recipe, their own spice blend, their own crust technique. It was the smell of Christmas Eve, the taste of tradition, the pie that marked the season. Simple, hearty, French-Canadian, and completely normal, until you tried explaining it to someone who'd never heard of it. Halifax donaire. The Halifax donaire is a Canadian twist on Turkish doner and Greek gyros. Created in the early 70s by Greek immigrant Peter Gamoulikos in Bedford, Nova Scotia. He swapped lamb for spiced ground beef and used a sweet sauce made from condensed milk, sugar, vinegar, and garlic. In 2015, Halifax officially named the donaire its official food. Through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, this specific sweet sauce donaire was basically an Atlantic Canadian secret. Visitors expecting a kebab got something uniquely Halifax, sweeter, messier, impossible to eat gracefully. It was late-night food, after-bar food, the taste of Halifax weekends. Normal there, exotic everywhere else, and fiercely defended by locals who knew the real thing when they tasted it. Dulse. Dulse is a red seaweed harvested on the shores of the Bay of Fundy, especially around Grand Manan Island, New Brunswick, which supplies a huge share of the world's wild dulse. For over a century, locals have picked and sun-dried it, then eaten it as a salty snack, brewed it as tea, or used it as seasoning. In the Maritimes, grabbing a bag of dulse at the market in the 60s through 90s was normal. To outsiders, chewing sun-dried seaweed straight from a bag felt like a dare. It was salty, chewy, tasted like the ocean, and Maritime Canadians loved it. Not everyone did, but those who grew up with it defended it fiercely. It was the snack that came from the sea, sun-dried on rocks, sold in paper bags, and eaten without question. Normal in the Maritimes, bizarre everywhere else. Chips, dressing, and gravy. In Newfoundland and Labrador, fries, bread dressing seasoned with local savory, and gravy have been served together since at least the 40s, based on oral histories. By the 70s, chips, dressing, and gravy was a standard order at canteens and stadiums across the province. Often described as Newfoundland's version of poutine, it stayed mostly on the island for decades. If you grew up there in the 60s through 90s, though, it was just the thing you ordered without even reading the menu. Bread dressing on fries, sounds strange until you taste it. Then, it makes perfect sense. It was comfort food, born from what people had on hand, turned into tradition, and kept normal on the island while the rest of the world had no idea it existed. Thanks for watching. If this brought back memories of red-stained fingers and lunchbox trays, smash that like button. It helps us keep digging up these tasty time capsules. Subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into the snacks, brands, and flavors that shaped your childhood. Got a Canadian food memory we missed? Drop it in the comments. And hey, share this with someone who'd argue about butter tart raisins. See you next time.